Thanks for having me. Great to be here. It's a great event. And I love that BitLayer did a lot around Token 2049, and Token 29 itself has been pretty interesting. It's way bigger than 2 years ago when I came for the last F1. So yeah, it's great to be here, and we're going to talk about sidechains. And sidechains are interesting because over the lifespan of Bitcoin, no one's been able to crack them because you always have security degradations if you try to peg in from Bitcoin. If you go in to the sidechain and then come back out, it's not always the same security. You're always taking a new security assumption. And this is why the Bitcoin OGs, they definitely don't prefer the sidechains, but we've spent a lot of time trying to figure this out because in the interest of something like BitVM, there's renewed focus. So we were kind of siloed with Syscoin building a sidechain, not contributing a bridge back to Bitcoin, but we now think that there is an interesting connection. So we'll go into sort of the reasoning why Bitcoin matters, the context on what I've been building under, given the AI race happening all around us, and the need for a secure decentralized solution that doesn't take any trade-offs of security. You have to have the security of Bitcoin plugging into the sidechain. Otherwise, I think there's no point, right? So we're going to touch a little bit on AI, and then we're touching on why that matters to Bitcoin, and then we're going to touch on the solutions needing a sidechain, and then from there, we're going to start talking about some of the problems of like the Ethereum landscape with layer 2s and stuff like that, and how we can solve that. The DA problem, the sequencing problem, and then tying it all back together in a conclusion. So a little bit about me. I've been in software for a couple decades now. Played around with neural networks and networking, and had a little bit of experience with AI before. About 20 years ago, did a little bit of work. I saw like the emergent properties, but didn't really see the next word prediction. And when the next word prediction came out, I instantly knew we have probably less than 10, 15 years before everything's going to change. So it was interesting to see that I was already into crypto for about 10 years now, and the connection between crypto and AI is really important because I know that crypto is going to be used by AI. We don't know how, but we know that it's not going to be fiat. So Bitcoin is a logical conclusion that AI will likely prefer to hoard due to Gresham's law. It's going to likely want to hoard because of the connection to the energy concept. Just like how we value energy the most, more than anything else, crypto AI will as well in the same way. So there's some correlations between AI and crypto that we'll touch on and the need for it. I've been around since the beginning of Bitcoin and just been sort of heads down in the code. But now with some of these breakthroughs, I think it's important to start talking about some of these solutions, the sidechain solutions that we're working on. Around 2019, we started looking at modularity. Modularity is a concept where you're breaking the blockchain down. Think of it as like a computer. You have your disk and your memory, which is like your DA, and then you have your CPU, which is like your layer 2 or ZKVM. If you break those things apart, you can scale much further than just like putting everything on one blockchain. You have the Solana idea where everything is happening on one layer. The concept is that if everyone is to use that system, it'll get bogged down, or the number of nodes becomes centralized, and it's just basically like a bank. The other concept is you go the opposite, and you start to put things separate, how the internet sort of scaled up through economies of scale, where you break up business processes. And that's, since about 2019, we've been working through the modular stacks and trying to figure out for Bitcoiners, what does a modular stack mean? So we're sort of in this hyper intelligence race, and with Strawberry, we're getting into AI researchers, and Wolfram was saying that the universe is basically a deterministic computer, which seems like a blockchain to me, but we are in this race that we need to figure out how to honestly and safely scale the AI mechanisms, and how AI is going to actually use blockchain, and what blockchain would it use? Would it use Ethereum, or would it use Bitcoin? We have probably a few years before the research engineer is going to be able to probably reproduce and code its own blockchain in some way, but we need to get there. And if we can't get there, we have a lot of conflicts going on, and we need to be able to survive up to that point to be able to build these systems that are going to take us to the next level. if you look at like basically the way that I see it is the biological range of humans is, ants basically don't even know that we exist. We're gods. In the same way that the machines are going to be there, they're going to be almost like a god to us. We won't be able to communicate with it. So it's important that this is sort of scary, but also interesting as well, because the other option is you basically go back around and we go extinct, right? We have a mad situation with nuclear threats all around us, and China has counter-strike capability. Russia has more warheads than the US probably. And so we have the situation where we need to get to the hyperintelligence phase. We need to survive long enough so that AGI does happen and is able to leverage the tech we're building. But the other option is we don't do anything and possibly we're at this inflection point. So in the context, the way when I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking about this, I'm always thinking about these things that if I was to design a system, it needs to have black swan prevention. It needs to be able to survive like Holocaust. It needs to be able to survive nuclear threats. It needs to be able to survive AGI. And AGI is interesting because the rationality arguments, crypto economics, like why would I spend $1 billion to make $50 million? That may not apply to machines. Machines may work on a different level of intelligence, and they may not actually care if they're losing money if they have a higher order logic that we can't understand. So things like EigenDA, for example, eigenlayer, where if you're going to spend $5 million to steal 1 million, it won't happen with us. We wouldn't do that. But that doesn't mean that machines wouldn't. And so it's important to sort of think of these things and contextualize, and when you're building the concepts, you start to think, okay, well, how can I make sure that if all of the servers in the world shut down, if AWS and all GCP shut down, the system needs to be able to survive that. And so that's how I think about it, and I know it's important because when AI agents come around, they may not care about rationality anymore. Crypto economics can get thrown out the window. And all the problems we're having in the world is related to money. Almost like what Extra's pyramid of value is showing, that gold was the store of value in case things get bad. Everyone goes and hoards gold. I think Bitcoin is that position now, right? Gresham's law. Everyone's hoarding Bitcoin and they're spending everything else. That's the idea of Gresham's law. And it's all related to money. So maybe we should reimagine money and how it's going to work. Maybe in the concept of Extra's pyramid, Bitcoin is the bottom of the pyramid, and you derive the concepts of all the other financial assets on top. In order to do that, you probably need some sort of expressibility. You need some sidechain or some virtual machine that could build on top, because you want to start with the base and then a digital version of it gets created through derivatives on top through smart contracts. So yeah, the way I think about it is if you have energy and you have the option to digitize the energy, that's the base value of everything. Not only do we prefer that because we can't create fake energy, you can't synthesize energy, therefore the value of Bitcoin is scarce. And AI wouldn't be able to do it as well. Those are the two common things that we can think of. AI and humans would both value energy the same. They both would value energy to be able to get to their goal, to be able to finish their goal. And so Bitcoin is a digital version of the energy, so it deserves to be more at the bottom of the stack rather than the top. And proof of work versus proof of stake. Proof of stake is a proxy to energy. I have to use US dollars to secure the proof of stake system, which is a proxy to the energy rather than a direct energy correlation. So in my thesis, basically saying that you definitely need to think about these designs, preventing the black swans, and making sure the black swans won't happen. You definitely probably want to tie into proof of work somehow. Proof of stake is great, you can build systems on top, but at the base, you probably want some proof of work. And modularity wins. You want to build these systems with modularity in mind, where you aren't putting everything on one layer. You're separating the layers, you're creating DA, you're creating settlement systems, you're doing decentralized sequencing, you possibly even other DA layers on top. You want to make sure that things are separate. So when people do scale, whether that's 1 billion people or 100 million people, the costs don't become overwhelming and the systems don't bog down. And if the servers all get shut down, whether that's 100 million people or 1 billion people, the same service is available, it doesn't get shut down. That's ultimate goal, right? And that's what we've been sort of thinking about the whole time. The other need for a sidechain is because you do have UTXO model built in Bitcoin. It's really hard to make it expressive. I know there's ways to make it expressive, But smart contracts and AMM indexes, naturally you would think of EVM, right, to settle on that. So you want to be able to have a computer running on the system, but you necessarily probably want an EVM due to the fact that we have so many Solidity programmers and so many things happening on Bitcoin or on Ethereum that you want to have on Bitcoin, but you don't have the ability to run them naturally. So EVM would be great to have. It doesn't necessarily need to be there, but it would be great to have. And you definitely want to link in Bitcoin in a trust minimized way. You want to be able to say, I am one honest person, therefore the system is secure. If 100 people are using it, you just need one honest person to say, yep, that's the state, therefore it's secure. And the key to that is like client security, which I'm not going to get too much into, but there's some opcodes like opcat that are going to make that happen. A lot of people are talking about opcat right now, and as soon as we get opcat, you're going to be able to do trust minimized bridges pretty easily. And the last thing is, if you want to solve for DA, the rule of thumb is wherever your DA is settling is where your state should settle. If you separate those, like if you settle on Bitcoin, but then use Nubit or Avail or Celestia, then you're taking the security of that DA layer. If you're settling your DA on Bitcoin, but you put your state somewhere else, then the security is where you put your state. So you need those two coupled. And if you want to have DA, then it necessarily has to be a sidechain. Because if you do everything on Bitcoin, it doesn't scale. If you want to have DA, it needs to be on the side, and then you must settle the state on the side. Otherwise, you're breaking apart the state and the DA, and the system won't be as secure. So if you want to have a modular system, you better think about a sidechain. If you're okay putting state on Bitcoin and using the Bitcoin layer as DA as well, and not scaling, you could probably get 50 or 100 TPS at max. But if you want to go beyond that, then we have to think about sidechains. And when you're thinking about sidechains, we've got to think about the security of the sidechains. It's got to have black swan prevention. The context, right? AI agents, the mad situation of shit breaks, we need to be able to make sure that the stuff is going to be surviving it. Yeah, so we basically covered the need for a sidechain, that you need modularity. And the data availability is a really interesting thing because it's sort of foreign to most people. Like why would you, isn't blockchain all data? But it's a specific problem we solved called the fisherman's dilemma. When you actually are running a rollup and you're a sequencer of the rollup, how do you prevent the guy that's settling the state from not storing the data? Like he basically says, here's the next state, I have all the data, here's the proof of the data, but then he holds 1 byte. And then you can hold everyone for ransom because he's holding that 1 byte. So what you need is the system, the blockchain needs to be able to prove that the data was put on the chain. Normally in Ethereum, everything was just dumped on the chain. And then you put the state on and the data's on the chain, and everyone can check it, and it's valid. The actual state transition checks that the data exists. But if you remove that, then you end up having some risks, because if you remove the data from the chain and you just put the state, no one else can reproduce the state. Therefore, the state actually is inconsistent. It's just a hash. If you don't have the data for the hash, then you can't reproduce the state. You wouldn't be able to exit. You won't be able to do a Merkle tree proof to be able to say, I own 5 Bitcoin on this system. I wouldn't be able to exit. You can't create the proof without the data. So there's 2 forms. We've come up with our own form that I don't think anyone else has thought of, but there's KZG commitments, and these are basically cryptographic elliptic curve operations that can prove that you have sampled enough nodes for a set of data, and you know that the data is valid and exists, right? And so Ethereum is going this direction with EIP 4844. The problem with this, with Bitcoin, it's fine for Ethereum, right? Because it's proof of stake. But the problem is you need proof of stake for blobs, for these KZG commitments. And the reason for that is when you're using KZG commitments, every node is not going to have all the data. It's only going to store a subset of data, like say 5 kilobytes per node or something like that, right? When you're doing that, what happens if a node goes down? Like you got to be able to slash them. You got to be able to say, I'm taking your money, you better stay up. So when you're slashing the nodes, then you require consensus for that, and that's proof of stake. So KZG commitments is tightly coupled with Ethereum's roadmap for sharding and for slashing, right? So that means if you have 51% of nodes and they go down, the data's gone too. So again, when I think of black swan attacks, I think the whole internet's down for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, maybe a day. And that is a black swan that I think is something that may happen. Maybe the Ethereum folks think not. And so I don't even start with this to say it won't work for us because it's not Bitcoin friendly. And the Bitcoin philosophy is I only trust myself. And if I validate everything myself, it works. So we came up with hash-based DA, which is basically every node stores the data for a shorter amount of time, but they just rehash the data to check. So basically it's quantum friendly, it's just a hash, there's no trusted setup. So it's very simple and it works. The way that I would see it is you probably want a hash-based system on your settlement layer on the sidechain, but then you use EigenDA on the layer 2. So if you're doing DEXs or DEX trading or GameFi or some sort of perp trading, you want speed, you want 15 megabytes a second DA, well, use the layer 2 system, but it's not black swan friendly or secure. But the end of that trade, you can go and settle on the base, right? So maybe at the end of your hour trading or whatever, just go settle on the base, and the base will have adequate enough bandwidth to cover that. So I think a combination of both makes sense, but at the base, we think hash is more Bitcoin friendly. And sequencing is another thing that we need to really think about. A lot of Ethereum layer 2s have central sequencers, and there's a good reason for that. Like you want to have UX, so you want to make sure that when I do a transaction, in 2 seconds, I want the MetaMask to show me that it's confirmed, right? We all have MetaMask, we all use it, and we all get the 2-second confirmations, and we all love that. But that's just someone giving you a receipt. It's not actually settling on Ethereum within 2 seconds. And that's the problem because now there's MEV attacks and there's all sorts of incentives and there's liveness failures there as well. So if that server goes down, the whole roll-up is dead. Everyone has to go and exit back to the main chain and figure out what to do next. So the guaranteed liveness is a really big thing. The other part about that is if I'm a system, a layer 2 with a central sequencer, and anyone wants to build on top of me, like an app chain, they wouldn't trust if you're running a central sequencer. No one else is going to trust that. You need decentralized sequencing for someone else to want to build. So if you want to be a B2B, you better think about decentralized sequence. The last part, Ethereum is struggling with this right now. They don't have economic alignment. I'm going to show you some interesting graphs in a second. Economic alignment is critical. Like the layer 1 validators should be the one that actually sequence these rollups. Because if they don't, then they could become parasitic. And this is what we're seeing with Pay, Scroll. Some of these rollups right now that claim to be Ethereum friendly, they're actually very parasitic. They're squeezing the settlement costs, they're maximizing the revenue, and you can't really stop that. That's probably keeps Vitalik up on it right now. The economic alignment means you have to do base sequencing, which means the validators of the settlement system, which is Ethereum, is responsible for also sequencing these layer 2s. However, in Ethereum, you start to add some risks because now the validators they're not only proving Ethereum, but they're also proving these layer 2s. And you have to make sure they're on separate nodes, and there's more complexity. We have our own design for base sequencing, but either way, I think you need decentralized sequencing, you need to have a base sequencing design, and you need to have economic alignment with the base layer validators. If your sidechain has validators, you better tie into that. But if you do that, you also get composability. I know you guys know ZK Sync has Elastic Chain, Polygon has Egg Layer, and that's basically the same thing. Is once you have multiple sequencers working together, you can actually create composability. So if you have liquidity on one layer 2 and more liquidity on another DEX on a layer 2, you could do like atomic trade between them at no security cost. It basically is fungible, non-fungible across all the layers. The problem with decentralized sequencing, this is the first thing that most people will say, is pre-confirmations, right? Like, I want to be able to walk away after 2 seconds. If I'm Walmart and I want to accept crypto, I want to have assurance that the order is going to be guaranteed, right? I want to make sure that, okay, the customers are coming to us, it's going to be free for them to use. I want to make sure that if you're buying groceries here, that stuff settles and it's not going to roll back, it's not going to charge back. Like, otherwise I won't use crypto, right? And so you need an ability to have pre-confirmations, and this could be crypto economic. This is fine. This is a human thing, right? This could be crypto. The users are humans here. The crypto economics of slashing. There's something called execution tickets, which we're looking at. those are ability for you to go ahead and slash the sequencer if they don't confirm or create the order that you're looking for. Or if they MEV attack you, they're actively going to get slashed. The other thing is, I think Ethereum guys were talking about this yesterday, about insurance DAOs, right? Insurance is a critical missing piece to this whole thing. Having a DAO socialize the cost for something like this is a really interesting design, because this is subjective. Pre-confirmations are subjective, right? So you can actually have a DAO, like an insurance DAO, to cover the costs. But pre-confirmations are hard. This is a big problem, it's hard. But execution tickets, insurance could cover the gap. So this is what happens on Ethereum today, and I don't want the Bitcoin system to fall into this trap. Blobscriptions were something around when the blobs came out, Ep.24, and it actually flipped. The cost of call data actually was cheaper than the blobs. That's interesting, because blobs were made to scale the rollups, but those same things that made to scale rollups made the costs of the original call data cheaper. So actually a lot of people started to change and adjust their behavior. The next time it happened, the behavior started to change. And basically the rollup providers, they started using call data again, or they used alt DA, they put it in DAC, they put the data offline. It was not secure anymore. Or they stopped putting the state on the blockchain altogether. Like they literally stopped posting the data, which is crazy. So you have post-Dekun, you have two sort of fee markets. You have one fee market before, which was fine. Now you have two fee markets. The fee market is based on EIP 1559, which in the blob space basically is, I have slots of 6 blobs, maybe 6 rollups in every block. And if I have 3 or more, then the fee automatically jumps up every block until it goes less than 3. So if I'm a sequencer, and all of a sudden this blobscription thing happens, and the fees go to $1,000 for each settlement, I can't take that risk as a provider. It can go to $1 million. It's just going to keep going. There's no limit, right? So the fees are very risky with that EIP 1559 model. I'm not sure why they did that, but I think a normal fee market would have worked better. But that creates a lot of risk for the layer 2 providers, because if they don't know the cost and they go to sleep and they wake up in the morning and they see the fee was enormous, then their revenue is all gone down and they're basically in loss. So what they started to do was they started, like Scroll. What does Scroll do in that situation? They just stopped posting. They just didn't even provide Ethereum the state, and so users had no ability to exit that system. They basically just stopped. Tyco was a based rollup, and so you can see like they paid enormous fees through it. But even they started to adjust the behavior. It's not fully decentralized. And you can see like Base makes so much money, like 95% revenue profit. And the shareholders are still saying make more. And so they're squeezing the settlement cost. And this is the problem we don't want Bitcoin to get into, because if you start to do this on Bitcoin, there's no going back. Like you can start from centralization and you can't go to decentralization after that. They're squeezing the cost. So the settlement cost is already low enough, but when this blobscription thing happened, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What I don't understand is the base fee when the price of blob spikes is buried. So you're not even paying the validators. This is the part I don't understand.
But the sequencers are still paying, right?
But they're burning the money.
Yeah, they're burning the money, but they're still paying somebody. And it's a socialized cost on the whole. Basically, everyone's gaining in some way, but they don't care. It's their shareholders want them to see money in their pocket. They don't care if it's burned or not, right? So the tips and stuff are also given to get the order into the blockchain, but the rest of it's burned. But it's still coming out of their pocket, right? So this cost is still going to happen no matter what.
Yeah. But when there's congestion and the price of blobs becomes like for Tyco it was millions per month.
Mm-hmm.
It was burned.
Yeah.
So the validators weren't even getting rich. Just the Tyco.
No, the validator's not getting rich. Yeah, but the cost was still happening to the rollup. So the rollup providers said, all right, that's too expensive. Let's just switch to alt DA and squeeze this down more. So they're already making so much money, but the idea is that they want to squeeze it more. So they're being parasitic. If they were forced to the consumers were forced the other way. It's a producer-consumer economy. If the producers were squeezed, this would be the opposite. But because it's a central sequencer design, they're allowed to squish the settlement as much as possible. There's nothing stopping them from doing it. You need to create decentralized sequencing to actually solve that problem. So, the way you would do it is you start with a base sequencing design where the economic alignment is with the validators themselves. And then they're the ones that could sequence. When they sequence and they're forced to sequence, then they can only get paid as much as a consumer wants to pay. So if, for example, like if it's a Dutch auction, a reverse Dutch auction, and someone says, okay, well, put my transaction in the blockchain, I'll give you $5. And someone else says, okay, put my transaction in the blockchain, I'll give you $6. Well, they can take the $6 first and then do the $5 second. But if you don't give them, you don't say it's going to be $10 now and then $15 if there's too many transactions. You just say, look, it's $5, take it or leave it. And any ZK prover can do that. There's no qualitative difference. If one ZK prover gets there and says, sure, I'll do it for $5, it doesn't matter. As long as the proof is there, it's going to be valid and it'll be accepted. So a producer-consumer economy needs to be established such that the producers are squeezed and the consumers are the ones squeezing. Opposite of that previous. You want the opposite of what's happening now. If we don't do it now, then we start centralized. It's really hard to step back and go decentralized. Because once you see the money flowing in and the profit coming in, it's hard to say bye to that. It's hard to say, oh, let's, for the sake of everybody, for the altruism, let's give it all back and go decentralized. It's really hard. So for the sake of the industry, I think we should all think about decentralized and trying to sequence in a decentralized way, starting proper, and then figure out if what works and what doesn't work. And contextually, figuring out that, okay, well, build these things with black swan prevention. Like, build these things so they're robust and not that you're assuming that the servers will always be online or something like that. So this is kind of what we have today. There's Bitcoin miners, and then they merge mine our chain, and there's a finality that prevents selfish mining. And then you have DA, hash-based DA, and the layer 2 and all that stuff, right? And we basically have a dual chain architecture. You have the UTXO, you have the EVM, you have these nodes that are running. The nodes are basically just full nodes. They're paid, and those guys would be doing the base sequencing. And where we want to get to is basically having a little bit more focus on the merge mining. So there's some interesting research going on to improve that, to tie in more security. And then every solution using BitVM or any scaling solution is going to need a light client. And so our ZK Lite client would tie back to provide the connection back to Bitcoin. So you would be able to move your Bitcoin in, move your Bitcoin out. And the whole reason for the sidechain is because you're tying the security back to Bitcoin. That's the reason for its existence. I mean, up to today, there's only a connection between the merge miners, but in the future, we think, given the context that Bitcoin is so important for our future, given that context, the whole reason for its existence is to do this. And that there's a little bit of focus there on the research to get this right and the BitVM stuff. And of course, with OpCat and these things, it's going to become way cooler. We need block hash emulation and all that stuff. So some of the guys at BitLayer are working on that. So just to recap, and then we can do questions. I think Bitcoin needs sidechains to scale with modularity. If you don't do sidechains, you can't do modularity. If you don't do modularity, you can't scale. Sort of an oxymoron. We need modularity to scale. We have a decentralized cost model that we're thinking, like having auctions in the cloud. So you have ZK provers. They're fighting. The producer-consumer economy needs to maximize to squeeze the producer instead of the other way around. And then we have limited time, I think, due to situational context to figure it out. Like, we literally have this time right now to figure it out, like get together, release these solutions, and probably we have AGI, I would say, the next few models. Like, Strawberry is already getting pretty good. At some point, it's going to need this decentralized extras pyramid, starting with Bitcoin at the base, build the financial products on top. That needs to be done through smart contracts, and we need these solutions for that reason. And the light client assumptions are something that we need to solve. Those are the things we're researching. The researchers here, you tell me, can we do it without an honest majority assumption? Right now, it has an honest majority assumption based on the validators of the sidechain, but we're looking to actively remove that. We have some proposals. We could definitely remove them, but then you have liveness restrictions. We want to have full liveness and full Bitcoin security, and tie it back into the sidechain with modularity in mind. So that's it. We'll take questions.
Do you have the timeline for BitVM right now?
BitVM, I think 3 to 6 months there's going to be something out. So it's looking pretty good. That's an industry thing, right? I think Robin's working on getting ZK. He wants to do ZK coins. For us, we're looking to create emulation of block hash. And that's why I was asking about that one. And we're looking to figure out how more to directly tie in the ZK Lite client in a secure way. Because the ZK Lite client is a way for you to prove to BitVM that your Bitcoin was burnt on the side, and you can claim it. So that's a little bit of research. Polyhedra guys were working on that with us as well. And I think Polyhedra is going to talk next, so maybe they can mention it. Yeah, so I would say in 3 to 6 months, you're probably going to start to see these solutions come out. Like BitLayer is working on it, and I think Celestia guys have a testnet going. I'm not sure if they have the BitVM stuff going or not, but there's definitely some prototypes already out there.
How will shared sequencing increase the value of the settlement layer if it's not like directly sequenced by the L1, but another layer between, which will grab the whole value and then actually just post the data in a blob on the settlement layer?
Yeah, so like value accrual type of thing?
Yeah, like how do you want to increase the value accrual on the settlement layer?
Yeah, when I said layer 1, I meant like the sidechain layer 1, because there's no super nodes in Bitcoin, unless you maybe tie into Babylon or something like that. But we were thinking the sidechain nodes, the reason for their existence, the super nodes, would be just to create governance and to create the Nakamoto coefficient to increase the decentralization of that network. The value accrual will always likely be Bitcoin first, right? Because that's the store of value everyone's working on. And the reason for the sidechain will be utilitarian. You know, you're creating EIP 1559 sort of economy. So it's not deflate only, going to deflate the supply to zero. You probably want more of a utility-focused tokenomics. The value accrual still stays Bitcoin due to the economies of scale. And you also have the miners, which are Bitcoin miners that are merge mining all this.
Will the data be settled on the sidechain, or
Yeah.
then eventually posted on the L1 itself, on
You-
Bitcoin itself?
You want to separate that because you have then MEV attacks. If you start to do stuff on Bitcoin, then you have the MEV risks right on Bitcoin, right? If you can create the secure connection between the sidechain and Bitcoin such that they are going to be equivalent security or pretty much the same security, then you don't need to settle on the DA on Bitcoin itself, because you're getting the guarantee through the ZK Lite client I was showing. You're getting the guarantee that the data exists there. It's especially if it's a hash based. If you do KZG, then you're getting a proxy of a guarantee that someone has stored the data through sampling. But if you do hash based, it's a direct guarantee.
Maybe I didn't catch one premise. So, MJ, did you say at one point that rollups on Bitcoin by construct will have less TPS than a sidechain, or did you not?
Yeah. So the only one that I think BitLayer was doing one as well, where it says directly on, and they use state diffs, ZK state diffs. Basically, if I have, say, 1 million DEX trades, and it's just me in the DEX, that's just 2 diffs. It's just the DEX and my address. So that represents 2. That's fine. But if you model it out, on average, if you take the Ethereum blocks, on average, you're talking maybe 50 to 100 TPS, even with state diffs. Without state diffs, it's really low, right? Because all the data has to go into Bitcoin. Every transaction is like 100 bytes. So it ends up being pretty low.
So for DA.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting the DA on Bitcoin and it's like optimistic, then like an optimistic rollup style where all the data goes on, not just state diffs, then it's really low. But with state diffs, I think it's around 50 to 100 on average if you model out what Ethereum did, right?
So why is this linked to TPS? This would be linked to finality time, no?
The TPS is basically how much are you able to process if you're using 1 megabyte or 4 megabyte blocks of Bitcoin. You only have so much room for the data, and then when the transition happens, there's only so much you can put on there, and after that, you have to wait the next block. So the throughput is based on like how much every block you can put in, and it's going to keep going every block without going in a queue. There's throughput you can say, oh, it's going to settle in the future, but that's not real throughput, right?
Oh, I was just curious about how you guys are thinking about execution tickets for base sequencing and stuff like that.
Yeah, so execution tickets is one of the things that we were looking at to be able to get a pre-confirmation order guarantee. And insurance was the ancillary thing that we thought you can probably even, like if I'm a merchant, I would like to have, if I'm Walmart, I want to have guarantees of this stuff. They don't care about execution tickets, so a proxy of that, maybe through a smart contract, also an insurance contract with an insurance DAO or something like that would help. So I think you would have multiple solutions there, right?
And this is like compatible with base sequencing somehow? I guess like the fast pre-confirmations and then, like, but the sequencer, would it be kind of the miners that are giving out the execution tickets, or like how would this work in practice? And like, are you looking at, you know, staking with slashability or restaking as a way to secure this, or not really?
I'm not sure about restaking because, you know, I think Ethereum is pushing back and all that now, saying that solo staking is the only way we're going to get decentralized, which goes against restaking. But the Bitcoin miners, you isolate them. If they want to be part of this, they would run the validators on the super nodes on the settlement system on the side to do base sequencing. The goal is to just create economic alignment with the settlement layer of wherever you're sequencing. So if that's Bitcoin, then Bitcoin needs super blocks or super nodes or something. Maybe use Babylon that has some notion of super nodes, and then those are the guys that are sequencing. So you can build base sequencing on a system that stores everything on Bitcoin, but you still need some notion of someone opting in, putting some collateral up, and they could potentially get slashed through execution tickets or something like that.
Got it.
The whole goal is just to make sure that the validators have that alignment, and it's not just some Joe Blow off the street that decides to join the system. He may not have economic alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'm using only ZK state diffs and putting that on the Bitcoin and using that as a DA, will it still be a roll-up, or do you see that as a sidechain?
No, that would be like I guess you consider like a based roll-up right on Bitcoin. But the challenge is that still wouldn't scale enough. Like, is 50 to 100 good enough? Maybe, maybe not. And imagine you want probably at least 1,000 or 2,000 at least as a base, and then you do the eigen DAs and all these other things on top to have less security but more scale. But at the base, I don't know, you're thinking like if everyone's using the system, including AI agents, 50 to 100 may not do the trick. But that's like the max you'll ever get, right? They're not going to increase the block size, so I think it necessitates a need for putting the DA or using a special DA layer to scale that up. And as well, as if you're doing that, all the blocks are large and it gets more expensive to store, and the full nodes, all that stuff is taken into account. Bitcoin's not meant to have just data being dumped there. That's not its use case, right? So yeah, for us, it's like you create a special component for DA, but the trick is on the side chain, make sure that it's super duper secure or the same security as Bitcoin. That is the holy grail. Like if you can tie the security of the side in there, then you don't need to worry that the DA is on the side chain and not on Bitcoin itself, because you've got this equivalent security from the side. That's the trick. Like that's the thing that no one's been able to solve yet.
We can discuss later.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, I think we're out of time. I think maybe Polyhedra is going to do native swaps and stuff now, so that'll be interesting. Looking forward to chatting more with everyone here.
Thank you.